but I'm going to talk first a little bit about building and when we moved and going to build the new layout. In the beginning, I kept a couple.
Where was it?
Pardon?
Okay.
Excuse me? Did somebody ask when was it that we moved? I don't remember. Probably 5 years ago.
I think that was just somebody who meant to be muted and wasn't.
Oh, okay. Anyway, I was doing some talking online. I do that. And a guy came up with a slogan called the All-Star Route for what I was planning on doing. And I like that. So I put that in. But it's more of a, what my logic is, more of a prototype scramble, we'll call it. If you take a look here, there's a blueprint of a town. I'm not sure where it's at, but it doesn't matter. But if you look in the top right, there's basically your regular lumber yard that from back in the day, and you can put that where it says lumber, and the elevator could go where it says elevator, and you look down here at the coal sheds, they could go where it says coal, and there's another feed mill type elevator that could go in there. But basically what my plan was build a layout using prototype track arrangements, but replace the buildings with ones I wanted to build rather than ones I had to build. Okay, and why am I doing that? Because, again, we talked about this once before. This is Roland, Iowa, and the photo was taken by Bill Armstrong there, that basically was the inspiration for the layout. Also operating at Charlie Duck's layout in Omaha. He has an out and back branch, and I like the way that it operated. I also had built a feed mill that was here in town. They called it a mini layout. I took it down to St. Louis a couple of times for people to operate on it if they wanted to. And I wanted to sell that thing too. So I had two pieces of my old layout plus that. And the plan was at first to model what was known as the Hampton branch. The reason I think that the railroaders called it the Hampton branch is it was cut back from Algona to Corwith, and from Corwith to Denhart. And so it's easier just to call it the branch of Hampton rather than whatever the end of the railroad was at the time. But at Beaumont was originally a sugar beet plant, as you can tell by the structure in the center. It became a soybean processing plant. And I thought, well, I could build Belmont, but fit in my allied mills in place of this guy. And you can see here the railroads that went through Belmont, Iowa. The red would be the Great Western, the black is the Rock Island, and the green is the Emmons St. L. And then I've highlighted in an oval of yellow the yard tracks into there, off the Emmons St. L. The Great Western could get in there also. This is a Sanborn map showing the other customers on the Emmons St. L in town. There was much, but this pretty much has them. Here's an older photo of the depot there, which turns out to be real similar to one that I'm going to build here in a minute or two. This is an aerial view taken probably in the 70s, showing the elevator and a lot of car park there. There's a ready mix they've added by then down at the end of the line there, up in the upper right-hand corner. And this was the sections that I saved off my old layout. It was the main, the yard in the center of town. It wasn't much of a yard. It had several customers and and I thought I could use those again. So what we have here is the top photo shows that yard, 2 yard sections that were 16 feet long, 8 foot sections that I was going to keep, and then the Allied Mills trackage that I was going to stick onto the end of them. In our new basement, the electrical panel is basically what you're looking at here is in the upper left. And I have to keep a 3 foot entryway to that clear space. So the layout was going to take on the 26 feet basically, plus or minus. So at Allied Mills at the end and the Old Main City sections, I didn't have enough room to make a curve at the end of the line. So I was going to have to come up with something else. So this is one plan, and other town along, we would start staging, go through Hanover, go through Alexander, go to another town, and then to Allied Mills at the end of the line. Well, I changed that around again, brainstorming here, leaving Sting, Latimer, Alexander, Allied Mills, and then a town past there. And the town that I picked that I thought was really neat was Britt, Iowa, on the St. Had a kind of interesting, simple but interesting track layout. I like the idea of having that crossover in the track. That was kind of interesting. So at the bottom, you can see a schematic type drawing that I made from the prototype and add Allied Mills to the end of it. So here I am laying things out on the floor. I don't draw things, I half visualize them. So the basement, as you can see, is just gray, nothing there. So here I'm basically trying to see how I can fit all this stuff in using buildings from my previous layout. But what am I going to call this thing? I don't know if any of you have read, I think it was the 2018 MRP, Model Railroad Planning Magazine, but I talked a lot about this in there and more in depth than I am here. I'm using pieces from Belmont, or I'm going to use, and I want to make Belmont. I'm using the track plan from Brick, and I'm using parts that were in Mason City. So I come up with this word scramble called Bell Britt City. And I thought, well, that's cool. That's what I'll call it. But, you know, the old saying, once you're a prototype modeler, you're always a prototype modeler. So I just couldn't do it. I had to reset and go back to looking at things a little differently. Here's that section of branch line with the mod in the middle there. And I took a look then, because I liked the rolling photos and the track plan so well, at a branch that came off and went over to Story City. So I thought, well, there was an article written in the Northwestern Historical Society on the branch. So I decided that maybe I could go ahead and build that. I could use Marshtown would be staging. First town out would be fairly large town for the branch of Zering, then Roland, and lastly, Story City. I think from the 1936 Directory of Industries for the St. listed the businesses that were in the three towns. And from what I've done looking at Centennial books and other archives, those businesses stayed pretty well into the 50s. Here's a timetable for the line. I don't pay much attention to that, but it's in here. So first up, I'm going to start at the end of the line at Story City, work my way back to staging at Marshalltown. Story City was abandoned fairly early on in the early 50s, and this train shows you why. They didn't have a lot of business. This train is traveling from Roland over to Story City. Here, this is the actual dates and things and the population of Story City in 1950. Story City is basically reality and some, I'll call it embellishments. At the top is the list of the actual customers that were there. And at the bottom are two that I added. We'll explain a little more later, but you can see that we're stretched out. The railroad actually comes in, would be the yellow line. It stops short of the Northwestern, which runs north and south. That red arrow is pointing to an interchange track that, or a piece of track that was put in from Northwestern to the north to MNCL, so they can still serve the elevator. This talks about how I went about building the framework for the layout. There's a piece that I've constructed so that I've got shelving under the layout to store things. More just carpentry here, keeping a gap so I can lay the next set of shelves on the cleats from that set of shelves. And here's two sections put together. So my original plan was to build Story City and build staging basically on wheels so that I could actually, as soon as Story City was operational, I could actually run trains in and out of Story City. Phase two would be to add Roland and then move staging further over. Now, if you want to continue the story, the next presentation is on the curve from Story City to Roland. The next presentation is on Roland. The next one is on curve from Roland to what will become Ziering, and that also includes the last curve to stage. So if you want to keep watching this crap, I can keep shoveling it. Here we got the shelving units up for where Story City is going to go. They're painted. My wife painted those. The curve is in place, kind of roughed in. Ceilings, receptacles in for the lights. This is the other end of the room. You can see the electrical box in its 3-foot protected area down there. And right now, pretty much Allied Mills pretty much out of the picture. Right now, it's just taking up space down there. Being an astronaut is taking up space. But I have concerns with the actual house infrastructure. You can see the water line. You may have noticed meter before. Water line comes up that back wall and across the top, and it's all galvanized pipe. So I want to replace that before I go any further. So here we go with using the plastic pipe that's popular now, replacing stuff. And then there's wiring issues in the house that need to be corrected. But now we're getting serious and going to build the layout sections. I've talked about this once before. Don't know if I have. I don't really remember how much is in here that we're going to see. Here we go. But anyway, what I did is I wanted to build these side-in shelves in case I wanted to change. The plan with the all-star route was to be able to change a complete sentence, pull them out, stick another one in. So they're all self-contained units. Basically, it's a 1x2 clear pine frame that I cut kerf into, start hardboard into that like as if it were a picture frame, put that 1x2s flat on the bottom, and added Homewood on top. Okay, now we're getting to laying track here. Story City is a story of two ends of town, pun intended. If you look at the photo at the bottom, you'll see there was a depot and a track came behind the depot. It served the butter tub, served the elevator, and a cannery. The front track would run around and lead to the turntable. So now we got to decide what we're going to do first. We're going to lay track or we're going to build structures. Well, the easiest way to lay the whole thing is to start with the depot and work my way to the left. Here's an old photo of the depot back in its prime. Here's a more modern photo of the depot. You can see it still has a big window, but that little balcony is now just a platform. What's kind of interesting is this is a February of '46 shot of the back of the depot, and it looked in really good condition. This supposedly is a '46 shot also, and the depot is well abandoned and looking horrible. So this didn't happen in just a few months. So somebody's off with their dates. But I chose to build the depot like this because I hate building windows. So I happen to have Doug. You can see Doug been really helpful with providing information. This is a drawing of the actual depot. Now we're going to build the damn thing. So I'm going to show you how I go about building something. The first thing you do is you don't draw a plan. You draw it on the actual material. This is styrene clapboard siding. You can see the types of doors. Now at the top in the blue is granite, and you can see the windows are small, but they have peaks on the top. And I don't know if you pay attention, but you will here in a minute, that the windows on the depot had peaks on top. So I'm going to cut those off and put them on the teaching windows. Here we've done that. We cut in all windows, put them in place, cut out all the pieces. I'm going to try this AK International chipping and warm. These are you paint the building like I did here in gray and tans, and then you paint it with this chipping fluid or the Warren Effects fluid. I use the Warren Effects basically around that where the window was, and then the chipping most places else. This shows you what it looks like afterwards, the failure of paint on building. I don't know if I've got, here's a closer shot. Basically, I used sandpaper on around where the bay window was, and then used a knife tip to clean off. I'm getting ahead of myself here. Once you put on the gray paint and you put on the AK Interactive, then you have to spray it with an acrylic paint. You wet the paint after it's dry, and then you can scrape it off with a knife blade. Another picture of it, and I think use some sandpaper on the door and knife it on the siding. Here we go, we're putting them together. And this is what it looks like when it's finished. Another photo of the other end. They need to have a deep sign at the other end because there was no train, only came from one end. I believe those shingles are clever model shingles that you put on one row at a time. I believe we bought those over at Train a few years back. So that's the depot. Now we have to have a base for it. So this is black styrene, again, bought over at Train Fest. And I used dimensional lumber to make it trim around the outside of it. And then I masked where the building is going to set. And then I sprinkled on cinder and dirt. And then blasted them with wet water and diluted glue. And then when all that was dry, I put on some static grass to make it look derelict. And then here's what it looks like sitting on base. And you'll notice there's dates down here in the corner. I pointed that out earlier of when I was actually building all this stuff. What 6 must be 16. I don't know. Maybe they'll be in there. Next building up from the depot was the Story City Butter Tub. And what I did was leave about 5 inches between where that track is going to be backdrop. So that's how big the building would proportion off of that 5-inch depth. A lot of times I cut the back of the buildings off because they don't matter anymore anyway. Just put some plain styrene on the back. One interesting up in the photo is, I don't know if you can, I'm trying to build forever, ever. You see those stacks of butter tubs there. I've been trying to figure out how to make those. And if I go to Hobby Lobby alone, I usually go back to the hobby part and the art supply stuff, buy what I want and leave. But if I go with my wife, then I have time to browse. So I found these beads and I glued them together. I don't know if you can see this or not, but it makes stack. I haven't painted them yet, but that's what I'm finally going to use to make butter tubs. Not the best, but it'll fill the bill, as the Pelican said. This is a butter tub. I thought I should explain myself because when I was first looking at this, I thought, what the hell is a butter tub? But you can see the company also sells coal. They sell coal. They sell stokers. They sell roofing. And here's the butter tubs. They're feed to whole. I don't remember. It might have said how many pounds of butter, but it's for shipping butter. Here's the photo showing those tubs. And you'll notice to the right, there's a guy standing on a box that's stirring in a vat. They would get in spruce lumber from out west, come in box cars. And then they would soak it in those tubs so they could bend it to form the butter tubs. And this is my building that matches that early shot. I didn't have a newer shot, so I made it look like it did the time that it's built. You can see they've added onto the building. You can tell by the different types of foundation. They said they sold coal. They needed somewhere to store the stokers they sold and the lumber. So there's a coal shed on the front and a lumber shed on the back. I don't know. I don't think their coal shed looked like this, but this is one of my enhancements. There were a lot of coal sheds around designed like this, and I thought I'd want to make one. So here it is with a little of that AK Interactive on the doors. This John Ben's sign is off the internet. I kind of together from pieces. Next up down the line is the elevator. Originally was at the time I modeled it was Williams grain. So this is the only photo I have of the place. If you just take man's height at being 6 foot, you can kind of get some kind of a ballpark figure about how tall things need to be. I did make a drawing. This is as good as my drawings get, so I can keep track of what I want to do. Here's the kit that I have to put together after I've got everything cut out, windows and doors in place. One thing that is hard to come up with is the spout that they use to feed in grain into the boxcars. It's basically, I don't know, it has a name, I'm sure, but they look like buckets that are stuck inside one another, and they're flexible. And I really don't know how to do that. So again, on one of my leisurely trips to Hobby Lobby, I found this in their jewelry aisle. I took a excuse a piece of styrene rod, filed it at an angle, and then drill a hole in the end and put a piece of fluoro wire in the stuff that comes in the F&C kits, and bent it over, and then strung those little cylinders on there and super glued them in place so that they look a little better than on on the building than just having a piece of tubing sticking out there. I painted this thing with a custom mix of some kind, and then went over it with alcohol and dull coat to dull it down. And I would never ever be able to match this again, but it's different than just your regular white or barn red elevator. Here I added the coal tower or coaling shed to the end. This is more standard size of coaling shed design. I used the AK Interactive again on the doors and the front of the building. Lastly, the cannery. Now, you can see the track has an offset that has to get around the turntable, which was removed by the time I modeled. So I couldn't make that. I didn't have the full 5 inches to add depth, and this is the non-trackside photo of the building. Again, the only one I had to work with. Here shows me laying everything out, and I only have a couple of inches, 3 inches at the most, to set this building in. Here I'm laying out. I want 2 car spots at the building. I want to be able to unload coal. This doesn't go up, but I made another drawing, as you can see. I've my plan, I got the drawing, I've got the picture, and I've drawn out the actual building. And this is what it come out like. Not the best in the world, but I've always thought of replacing it, but I haven't yet. So this is the west of town, from the station, the butter tub, the elevator, and the cannery. All of these things are fairly accurate. Jason and I went down to Iowa City, and the collection, same collection of Minnesota has it. I don't know if Wisconsin may have one. Vincent Mark used to go around and take aerial photos. And the one thing I noticed after I built all my stuff is you'll notice the cannery has several ports of it that were 2-story. And my back of mine is only 1-story. And all of the elevator, the head house is much larger than the head house that I have. I could go ahead and read that, but I'd never be able to match it. So I'm living with it. Up in the upper right, you can see the butter tub. By the 70s, when this was taken, it was basically just had 1 doorway. All the windows were boarded over. So now if we go east of the station, there was land that was marked as Randall Lumber. There's also another section across the front called Martin Jensen's. And across down the block to that were the stock pens. And so what I've done is I took the all-star route Liberties and for the right end of town, and I'm going to build Jensen's move Jensen's down a block and put it on that spur that did have the stock pens on it. I'm going to build the lumber, and I found out that there was also an unloading ramp there, a machinery platform. So if we look here, the trestle has been removed, or the turntable's been removed. This track did have an engine house on it, and that's all been removed. And that loading ramp was built where the turnout was to that spur, but I've ignored all that. Stock pens are gone, and this is the only photo that I have of Jensen's. And you'll notice there's a truck running right in front of it. At the bottom of this, if you can see it at the bottom, you'll notice that the right and the left, where Randall Lumber is and where the stock pens are, there are 2 stub tracks, and very, very faintly, there are lines that have been erased where those 2 tracks were connected, but I didn't do that. But anyway, here's Jensen. What I did was move Jensen down a block and put it on that track where in place of the stock pens. So I use commercial windows and doors whenever possible. So my match isn't exactly the same as the building that Jensen used to make concrete block and other lawn ornaments. And I'm sure that they did their work by hand pouring castings of cement blocks. But I wanted to automate the place, make it a little larger. So I wanted to add in some better car variety where I could bring in cement hop besides boxcar to haul the block. I wanted to bring in cement hoppers and regular hoppers for aggregate. So this was my plan following ready mix practices. When I started off, I built where the batch mixer goes is just a cube made out of concrete block, or it's plastic embossed. Tank for storing cement is a piece of PCV pipe with a top added to it and archer rivets around it. Walther's elevator. I think that's plastistrut square tubing. Here shows I got a little over, in the 40s, they wouldn't have had a cage or a ladder. The only cages they knew then was for animals. But anyway, this shows the elevator enhancements. They didn't put a door on the bottom for the traction, so I had to add that. I bought the Walther's, I think it's a modern conveyor or whatever, but there's no conveyor. It's basically just a truss bridge with a pan on top of it. And I think that's what they considered to be a conveyor. So I had to add all the rollers, I had the head pulley, tail pulley, and used a piece of Scotch tape for the belt. I also needed to add a hopper at the end so that they could actually dump the aggregate in to carry it up the batch mixer. Yes, it is 16. That's when all this was being built. We moved here in 15, I think, or 14, I don't remember. Anyway, this is the top of the thing, got a motor and a gear case, and chain drive, no protection on the chain drive at that time. When the batch would get the correct amounts of concrete and aggregate sand, they shut off the belt. Well, they initially were not going to be able to always know just how much to put on the belt. So you're always going to have some left over, so that when I start up next time, that'll go into the batch mixer. And I've been on conveyors 40 years, so I know where they spill onto the pans, also onto the ground if they plug up. So now we're setting everything in place. We've got basically an auger under the track for unloading cement, going into the elevator, into the tank for the cement. We've got another belt conveyor with a hopper underneath for unloading aggregate to dump on the ground. And we've got our belt to load aggregate back in again. I wanted to have concrete block. The only concrete block I could find at the time was by Mr. Plaster, and it's really crude stuff. It comes with wrapping around it. I had to file off, and then I had to drill 1,000 holes to make look like it was hollow tile. And here it is stacked up, not painted yet. Moved across the street now to Randall Lumber. You can see there's a shot taken from the depot looking this direction, and you can see the engine house, and you can see that building that's marked off as a rectangle there. But I decided to go ahead and turn it into a genuine lumberyard, use the basic design of lumberyards of the day. And I had to paint it something that was catchy, and I mixed up kind of a, I don't know, a creamsicle color to paint the thing with. And the roofing on this is the MicroMark stick-on shingles. They're really nice. They're worth looking into. It shows the silvery roof, how I cut out windows. They always had sack houses next to the track. Even if lumberyard was usually maybe a block or two away, they would have sack houses on next to the rail sidings so they could unload bag product and store out of the weather. So here's the layout with the main building, the sack house, and then I had a shed left over from my other building, other railroad that I set there also. This talks about the ramp. It tells you more than anybody ever needs to know. This tells you the exact size of the ramp. So we're going back again. You can see on the top, the ramp was going to go where that track was that went to the engine house, and what I'm using for the spur into Randall Lumber. Below, you can see I'm laying all this out, and I want to make sure I have room for a 50-foot car and a couple of 50-foot cars. Here's the ramp built, the specs, maybe not quite accurate because I have a photo of it. It's the right size anyway. Now that we've got buildings built, it's time to lay the track. Well, to make a short story long, at the time I was doing this, there was no Code 55 track available. I knew someone who custom built the Code 55 fast tracks turnouts for me. And I had a bunch of Central Valley tie strips. I knew up at the Twin Cities at Scale Model Supply, they had Code 55 rail. Excuse me. Had Code 55 track that was dual gauge. So my plan was to buy that dual gauge track. They must have had 8 pieces of it, and rip out that center rail and then lay in these tie strips. Well, that's what I'm doing here in this photograph. You can see the buildings are in place. This is the phony end of the railroad, the east end. Okay, quiz time, I guess. We'll just hit this quick. Basically, was I able to the All-Star route? No. Did I follow the prototype easily? No. Then what did I do? Well, I created a balance between prototype accuracy and operational potential. How's that? Anyway, scenery and operations will come up next time. And that's it for tonight. All done. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Nice job, Clark. That was fun.
Okay, let me get out of here.
Okay.
Stop sharing screen. What the hell? Right there. I got it. Okay.
There you
There,
are.
we're done. Any
Excellent.
questions?
Clark, this is Dave Nelson. You mentioned this AK interactive material. Exactly.
AKA as in a-hole.
Right. Okay. But what exactly is it? Is it a paint or is it something that you paint on?
It's a liquid. You can paint it or you could spray it, I suppose, too. I just put it on with a paintbrush. It dries rather quickly. The only trick is you have to go over it with an acrylic. So you want to use an enamel type or a lacquer paint under it. Put it on, then go over it with an acrylic. So you can dampen that acrylic and rub it off or scrape it back off again to give those effects. A lot of guys use hairspray. Yeah, I've heard that works. You can also use salt if you like a tank or something. I tried that on some tanks for Carlberg. But yes, you can, the AK makes they're more of for the military modeler or airplane guys or whoever. They make all kinds of products. Those are the two that we use. There was an article in Model Railroad Craftsman, oh, 4 or 5, well, however long ago this was done. And one of the guys here in town had the article, and we all decided to buy some. And I know that Bob Gretland has used it on boxcar roofs real effectively.
Terrific. Well, that was a lot of fun. Thank you, Clark. Are there any other questions for Clark?
My dad always liked to work that job because he said you could play cribbage in them 44 tonners really easy.
You know, he told me about pheasant hunting off that thing, and somebody discharged a shotgun in the cab, and they had to fix the hole in the roof before they got back to Marshalltown. And never did find out how they fixed it, but no one was ever the wiser, I guess.
He always told me they shot pheasants there on the Hampton Branch too. They would shoot them and pick them up on the way back.
Yeah, yeah. I remember him telling me several stories. Those were better days than now, I guess.
Yeah, really.
In some respects.
Nicely done, Clark. Yep, lots of fun. So,
All right. Well, we are working out the schedule for next week, so I'll let everybody know. But thank you very much, Clark. That was very, very fun and informative. And thanks everybody else for coming. We'll see you next week.
Thanks, Greg.
Bye.